to know that. Because, well, and I'm doing, I talked to Gabrielle last night.
Yeah.
And this is something I spent for a large amount of time. So the idea is to have a cryptographic solver that host in a trusted environment. And the idea is to make sure your keys are kept secret and to be able to manage that to the cloud. So Gabrielle's been made Microsoft did and they're not committed to implement it, but they're looking at that.
Right. Well, different parts of Microsoft need different.
Yeah.
I work mostly on digital security protocols related.
Oh, okay, right.
So the passwordless sign-in is one of the places where we want to have securely held keys used for. Very good.
Okay.
And it's just, the other thing is that from a processing standpoint, it's just one other layer of the code.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Just checking in. I'm sure everything's working here.
Okay.
Are you going to be presenting from your laptop?
That's a pending card. No, from Jim is going to next.
Oh.
Press the button. Yeah, we did not intend to write our email. Did we send the receipts? No. This is ours.
Yes.
Oh, none.
So will you be using the clicker? I just want to make sure that it's working because we're having issues with that. Looks like the volume is turned on, so.
So do you want me to leave that here?
I'll encrypt it.
Bring it somewhere.
The blue sheets? Should drop it off at registration.
Okay, I'll do that. You look tired.
But I did get to sleep yesterday. No, Stephanie took over for the morning since I helped stay for the plenary. So I got to sleep until 10:30. I know. My first day sleeping yesterday. Yeah, that's always a bummer. I never get to sleep because I have a toddler at home, so yeah. She wakes up at 6 a.m. every morning. Right. Yeah. Huh?
Is she here?
No. She's back at home.
Okay.
Yeah. She's with her dad and grandparents. So
Okay.
they took her to Disneyland.
So you have to time to rest.
Yeah. I jumped right back into it. Hey guys.
Good evening, everyone. If you're not expected ACE to be here, you're in the wrong room. And we would like to someone volunteer for a minute taker. Okay, good. So we got one. Thank you. Any JavaScript? Okay, right, good. And then Marco is going to take the relay.
No, he's going to do that.
Okay. Okay, so your neighbor is going to do the relay. So let's start. Do you want to take the mic, Jim?
No.
So, please, the note wells. we have to show the slide.
Oh, I don't have to know about slide.
Mm.
Unless you need share slides.
No.
Yeah, I just skip share slides.
Well, so this session is under Not Well. Is there anyone that is not aware of the Not Well? If you're not, you can search that on your favorite search engine. Document status updates. Well, documents that have been updated are going to be presented today. And anything you want to add?
So basically, since we met last time, all of the documents that we had been working on have now gone to the area director. And if the area director was here, which he seems to have not decided not to show up, the first thing I do is be saying, so Ben, when are we actually going to get AD reviews on these documents? Which he's going to say, well, he started on the first one.
So have just a moment, have we indicated?
I can't hear you.
Have we indicated a priority?
A priority has been indicated to him, which is the proof of possession, the EST, and then the 4 OAuth documents.
Good. We really have to get this proof of possession thing through.
Yes.
Really.
And he in the data tracker, he has actually moved that into, I'm trying to review it state.
So, Francesca?
Hi, everybody. Today I'm presenting the key provisioning for group communication using ACE. This is a working group document. Version 2. So a quick recap for if you haven't seen this before. These documents specify how to use the ACE framework and profiles to provide authentication, authorization, and key distribution to nodes joining a group. So the first part of the exchange here is a message flow from the document. The first part, the client is a node that wants to join the group, contacts the AES through the ACE or does an ACE exchange with the AES and the KDC. Posts authorization token to the KDC. KDC stands for Key Distribution Center. And then afterward, contacts the KDC to get the keys. So this through a key distribution request and response. After that, it has the keys in place to protect the communication with the other group members through a dispatcher. This dispatcher can be, for example, a broker if we're talking PubSub, or it could be just a multicast. So first of all, status update of version 2, and I'm going to go through this update quickly, but we would like some feedback from the working group. All these updates come from review by Jim, so we have implemented these changes based on his review, and he has signed off on those updates. So the first one, we added procedures for updating and renewing key materials that were previously missing. We added a type to the key distribution request. So this type indicates if the key distribution is a join request. So when the node first joins the group, it's a leave request if it's the node is telling the key distribution center that it's actually leaving the group, and it causes rekeying for the current group members. There is the update type for the key distribution, which is the node requests the most updated or current key material. Then new, if the node wants to retrieve new key material for itself. And then pub keys, if it wants to request one or more public keys of current group members. So these were already there, just we added this type that makes it simpler to see what request is. Karsten?
Carsten, have you considered restifying that?
Have we considered what?
Restifying it?
Can you expand?
Well, this is a set of verbs you have there: join, leave, update, new. And of course, in REST, we usually do this over resources. So we create resources, delete resources, observe resources to get updates.
We haven't considered that. If you have suggestions on what terms are better, but this is for a new field in the request that is called type, and this type will take some values, and we define here what the values mean. So yeah, we can discuss.
So just as an example, requesting the current most updated keying material. Do I do this once a second, or usually we try to model this as an observe, if possible, and that's easier to do if it's already a REST interface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hi, Francesca. Robin Wilton. Just a really quick question. When an operation such as in this case leave causes this KDC to rekey for the current group members, is there a may, should, or must tell the group members that that rekeying is happening?
So it's a must. So the key distribution center must rekey. Yeah. And we don't. This document doesn't specify exactly how this rekey happens. Yeah, maybe Marco wants to say something more.
Well, I don't think that was quite their question.
Okay, sorry.
My fault. My point is, if the KDC must update the keys for a group, are the members of that group told that the rekey is happening?
It depends what is the rekeying, like what is used for rekeying. It could be an observer, or it could be just a unicast or multicast, depending what is set up. This draft stays general, so it doesn't define exactly. So, yeah.
Marco from RISE, just to complement on this, it's left to the application the very final decision, depending on if you really care about preserving forward security in case of leaving nodes. If you do, you must do that, definitely. Details depend on your working scheme.
And how it's done as well. Okay. So other updates. We have added additional fields for negotiating the format of the public key to use. So this is done in the 201 response to token post in the ACE exchange. We added a proof of possession signature of a nonce from the client to the key distribution center in the key distribution request, because we are also sending this public key. We added requirements on profiles of this document, such as multicast and pubsub. So this is an appendix saying what the profiles of this document have to implement. We define the application profile. So here we need these details additionally to this document to be able to implement this. And this is different from the ACE profiles that we call transport profiles that are used in the first phase of the exchange. Then we define the default for the format of parameters and some IANO registration with labels and expanded on security considerations. So following the some reviews of version 02, we have a couple of open points we would like to discuss today. The first one is about scope. So right now, scope is defined in this document is defined as CBOR array of 2 elements, group ID in, for example, multicast, or a topic for PubSub, and then one or an array of roles. So you can see in the example, in our case, we have array topic 1 and then array of publisher subscriber. MQTT defines something similar in a different format, so it allows for multiple scopes and multiple roles. And we got a question from Jim that was, should we allow multiple scopes in the same access token as, for example, MQTT does? And to answer this question, we have to look at the actual application profiles. For example, if you're talking about multicast and multicast using OSCORE GroupCom, then no, because there is a one-to-one mapping between the scope and the security group. If we're talking about PubSub, then yes, it can make sense because you may want to use the same security material for different topics. So if we do want to do this, what does this mean? Our proposal is to allow multiple scopes, which can be useful in certain use cases. For example, not in multicast and OSCORE are used, but for PubSub. That means that we would add an array for the first element of the scope, so we would allow several topics. Also, Jim noticed that there is no need for sending the request. Right now, the key distribution request was sent to a URI associated to the topic. So since the topic is contained in the access token, that is not needed. Or sorry, in the key distribution request, that is not needed. And instead, this key distribution request can be sent to a fixed group URI rather than one associated with the scope. And the scope can be made mandatory in the key distribution request. So, for example, here in the figure, you would see that this key distribution request is sent to this path group key, and then under the group key, there is a resource handler that is going to redirect the key distribution request to the right topic depending on the scope contained in the message. So I think we discussed this with Jim, he seemed to be okay with this. If anybody sees a problem with this.
Peter van der Stok, just a technical detail to avoid confusion. Why not define the scope in the 2 documents, one for the group and the other for the PubSub? Because if you do it in one document, I'm sure some people.
Sorry, why don't define?
Why not define the scope in the 2 documents, one for the group membership and the other for the PubSub, and leave it open in this draft?
There are some things that need to be specific to the 2 documents. For example, the values of roles here for PubSub would be publisher, would be a text string with publisher and subscriber. But it can be the same in both. There is really no reason to have it different. Like the format of the scope can be the same. Do you see a reason not to have it? I think it would be easier actually to have the same format.
So just clarification, do you want the scope at 2 different places is the same format, or do you keep one place?
No, we're defining the only format there is about scope in the document, yeah.
I understand that you defined in this document that it is an array of 2 elements, and that the second element can be so many elements. That I understand. Yeah. But in the factual documents that you can use it for topic, you can have several of these group key. No, how did you mind it? Topics. Yeah, okay, so several topics. That the format looks that is differently used than for the group management. I think that should be separate than in the documents. Otherwise, it gets confusing.
Okay.
I mean, okay.
Maybe we should take this offline so you can tell me better. But I take it that you think it's confusing, but you don't think it's going to create a problem. Yeah. Okay, but let's continue. Some more open points. So right now, the document specified it's C signs a nonce 1 that is generated by the KDC for pub and pub key. And Jim suggested that we add a second nonce 2, that is signed together with nonce 1 and sent to the KDC in the distribution request. That seems like a good proposal, so we would go ahead and implement that unless there are comments. Another open point, and we would like the opinion of the OAuth experts here, is about registering new parameters, because right now we have 2 new parameters that we are using in the token post and in the response to the token post. And right now we were registering in the ACE creation hints registry, which is, we were told, the wrong place to do it. And Jim suggested that we register them in the OAuth parameters registry, and then we add the OAuth parameters CBOR mappings.
Mike Jones, Microsoft. I agree with Jim.
Okay, that sounds good. Also, I don't know if anyone is monitoring Jabber, but I assume that Ludwig can just go in the mythical queue if he wants to comment as well. Okay, thanks. Great, so we'll go ahead and do that. Yeah, we might have more questions for the OAuth people, because we don't know if you need to specify more details, as these are parameters specific to ACE and this document. But final question, another comment from Jim was the format of keys could be the same as the one used in the CNF field. So we would do this modification. Doesn't change much. It's just an update to do. Then we have a couple more points that are about rekeying. So what the document says about rekey is that, so this goes back to the discussion we were having before about updating, etc., rekeying. So the KDC should renew the key material upon group membership change and should provide it to the current group members through the rekeying scheme used in the group. So right now we define how the C can get a new key material, and we say alternatively, the redistribution key material can be initiated by the KDC. Otherwise, the default mechanism will be the client sends a request to the KDC asking for new key material. If the redistribution key material is initiated by the KDC, we don't know what endpoint should the KDC use to send the rekeying messages. And we don't know if this is in scope of this document, but we think it should be. And our proposal to solve this is to define a new optional parameter called rekeying URI, or something else if you have a better idea, in the key distribution request. And the client used this parameter to tell the KDC what URI it should use for sending unicast request messages back to the client. So in this case, the client would take the role of a server and is telling the KDC that would take the role of a client to what endpoint to send these new keys. Karsten.
Yeah, this is the point where
yeah.
I need to repeat my request, maybe looking at a REST-like interface for that.
There is one possible reason why this is better than a RESTful interface, and that is the server can do confirmation that the client's got it rather than just doing an observe back. So you can say, so that if the server could send a con message to each of the recipients.
Yes, you can do that with observe too. You don't get a response from the receiver that they actually liked it or something. But
so Yeah, I think that that is listed as one of the options as well. So I think these are not things that go against each other. It's more like alternatives.
Yeah, alternatives are bad.
But this is a general document, and then the specific application profile needs to define exactly which mechanism to use.
Yeah, but why open a box of many alternatives? I mean, alternatives are bad because they all need to be implemented, they all need to be interoperability tested.
No, they don't.
Well, they do. If you offer them and somebody picks them up, you have to.
This document is not implementable by itself. It needs a profile that specifies the details. And one of these details is how do you do the rekeying and the updating. Yeah.
So until a profile comes along that really needs this, why do it?
Okay. Note taken. Okay, so second point, another alternative mentioned for rekeying is with multicast messages. And the client would not know what IP multicast address it needs to listen to for rekeying. So the proposal is to define a new optional parameter, rekeying URI, in the key distribution response. And the client, that should be the DC uses this parameter to listen for rekeying messages. Or yeah, the client uses this parameter to listen for rekeying messages, but it's the KDC that sends it. So I think we will go ahead and implement these proposals if there are no strong objections, and then we are happy to get feedback and reviews and comments about this. I think that's
when you mention implement.
I mean, like, put in the document,
okay.
Update the document with this. Yeah, that's.
I'm a bit unclear about this restification. What's going to be the impact on the current document to restify that? If we do.
Well, I think the answer to that question is probably some text changes, but I can't answer it in more detail. I would have to check it.
Okay.
Okay, so before giving the floor to Marco, you can switch to the So this is a slide from the PubSub application profile, because we got these questions a couple of times. So there are these 3 documents, the one I just presented, the ACE key group com, and then there are 2 additional documents, the COA PubSub profile and the ACE key group com OSCORE and the profile. And we get this question, how is this document different from the ACE key group com? It looks like duplicated text and I don't see what it adds. So now I'm trying to answer that question. Basically, the ACE key group com, the one I just presented, defines a general message format for authorizing and providing keys to group members in the context of group communication. It does not specify for what communication transport protocol or what security is used with this. The ACE COA PubSub profile defines specific content of ACE key group com to profile to use it with COA PubSub and COSI. So it's using COSI to protect the content of the publication, and it's using COA PubSub. And the ACE key group com OSCORE define the specific content and format of the general one to use it with COA group communication, RFC 7390, and using OSCORE group com as security. That's it. That's the difference between these 2. Questions?
Peter van der Stok. It's the same remark I made just a few minutes ago. I have to go from one document to the other, parse 4 lines, go back, parse 4 lines in the other documents, and that's the way I make progress, and it's a bit embarrassing.
Why are these separated like this? Because when I first came here with the co-op ABSA profile, and that contained everything in one document, and then I was told, oh wait, this is a group communication profile, and you can reuse this with OSCORE group communication and with co-op group communication. And I said, okay, let's do that. Then I split that up and I said, you can reuse this with group communication, but you need to structure it differently. So I can only do one. We need to decide if we want to do one document with all the profiles or we want to do several with a more structure in a different way. So like I did this because of a comment from the working group. Then we can improve for sure on duplicate text. Hopefully we can improve on not repeating text and making it clear. But we need to decide on a direction. So I think this is the better direction. Otherwise we would have a huge document with a lot of different things in it, where you would have to jump from one section to the other. So that's it.
Which one is this you're doing?
Hi, Marco Tiloca from RISE. An update on this application profile of ACE as a special instantiation of the draft Francesca just presented. This is version 2, also a working group document. Quick recap, but you should be familiar with the main model right now. This is about authorizing nodes to join a group where communication is secure using group OSCORE, and through the join process getting the key material necessary to communicate in the group. So as a first step, a client asks for an access token to the AS. The token is posted to the group manager, which is the KDC of the general model, and in the response it gets back the key material, and then can use group OSCORE to talk to the other group members. What is out of scope of this document is authorization for the client to access resources at the very group members. Hint, that's the next presentation. And the actual secure communication in the group, well, that's just group OSCORE. A few updates from previous version, mostly based on the review we got from Jim on the previous version of the document, and from Ludwig on the latest submitted document. Most of the things are aligned, of course, to the corresponding updates on key group com that Francesca presented. So some renaming of roles and profile name, the use of data structure essentially to negotiate parameters on signature algorithms and such between the joining node and the group manager. Improve text about provisioning of public keys from the joining nodes and the consistency checks that the group manager has to perform on them. Also considering the case when possibly the group manager already has, from previous interactions with the joining node, its public key. We also extended the negotiation on these public key related parameters, and you have fundamentally two approaches to do that, at least really embeddable into ACE, so that can happen during the token post and response or during the join request and response. So it's more ask for information versus trial and fail. Also, we included the proof of possession of the client's private key that we have to slightly improve, as Francesca mentioned, and I'll mention in the following slide. We have a few open points on these things soon. Speaking of which, I mentioned already approach 1 and 2 for agreeing with the group manager on signature parameters, encoding of public keys, and so on. There's a third approach that was also presented again this morning in core. In a nutshell, discovering very in advance the group, and through that discovering, knowing very early about how the group works, meaning what algorithms it supports. And that can be beneficial for the joining node, of course, to just forget about the approaches 1 and 2 and go full speed for the joining. Our line would be to keep all 3 approaches in principle supported in the draft without particularly recommending on mandating any. And this is fine for everyone. Take it as a yes. No, Ben.
I'm surprised that Karsten is not coming up to say that choices are bad. Oh, he says it from the table.
Karsten, I haven't done the work to decide which of these we need. So yeah, I think this work should be done. But I don't know what the answer is. Yes. Yeah. So excuse me. So with this work is looking at the 3 options and find out what we lose by not doing a specific one of those options and deciding whether it's worth it.
Francesca, as a co-author, I think it's good to keep all these options and let the application decide. Just to note.
Yeah, from the look of it, I would guess that as well, but let's do the work.
Okay, thanks. The second point, there was a new registry also defined in keygroup.com, actually. And in this document, instead, we are registering a value in it, specifying that public keys in the group are supposed to be encoded as cozy keys. And right now, we don't actually have any particular plan to register any other encoding that we cannot even think about. But still, in principle, it's good to keep the way open for possible future encodings. Why not? But then the point is, what would be a good registration policy to already suggest for the future here? This is a very open question. Assuming we are fine with what make possible future encodings.
Looks like Francesca got an idea. Karsten.
Francesca, I don't have an idea. I really want people to say anything in their mind here because we need help with this. We don't have a proposal. We need ideas.
Karsten Bormann, X509 certificates and RFC 7250 raw public keys are potential candidates. So I think it kind of seems obvious that there should be a way to register once they are needed. Policy is probably more on the conservative side, like what's it called, IETF consensus or something like that.
Jim Schott from the floor. I don't think the registry is needed. I think we should use the cozy key, the key confirmation registry that's part of the POP document, and then it's there for everybody who wants it, and people can register as they need it.
Fair enough. Okay, for the proof of possession of the client's private key during the joint request response exchange, it works pretty much as it was extended in Francesca's comment on his keygroup.com. Of course, here also to avoid an oracle, we are about to sign both nances, one one got back from the resource server, one generated by the client. We just don't think there's really nothing else to sign in addition to this. We don't need to bring in anything more here as a final check. So we'll keep this perfectly aligned with ACE group com also in this sense. Okay. And this open point 4 came from the latest review of Ludwig. This concerns group rekeying. So for some reason, the group manager has to redistribute the key material in the group, practically the OSCORE master secret. And now the text is saying that when doing that, the group manager may take a best effort so that all the group members just continue having the very same sender IDs. And the best effort was put there just to leave a lot of flexibility to the application on the group manager. And for instance, it can just refactor the sender ID space in case this happens upon many nodes leaving. But probably it makes sense to consider an alternative or a rephrasing so that the group manager instead must or should preserve the very sender IDs for all group members upon a full group rekeying. And this is different from a corner case when the goal of the group manager is about rekeying a single group member, for instance, and that can be done by assigning a new sender ID exactly to that group member only. Should we switch instead the main general case highlighted there with a must should preserve the same unchanged sender IDs?
Jim Schott from the floor. This should be a must, because if you don't do it, among other things, everyone has to go retrieve all of the public keys again, and that's probably not a good idea.
I'm happy to make it a must. Thanks.
Ludwig from Jabber. Why would the GM, the group manager, shuffle around sender IDs?
Okay, so this is for the corner case at the bottom of this slide, I suppose. The example, if you have a single group member whose sender sequence number wraps around, it has to inform the group manager for sure. And then the group manager has two choices. First, rekey the whole group, distributing a new master secret altogether. And that, of course, has a big impact on performance. There is a shortcut just as secure for the group manager to just assign the new sender ID to that node only. And that node will derive out of that a new sender key and can resume communicating with the sender sequence number, use the partial IV restarting from 0. Of course, the other group members would have to derive a new recipient context out of that. But overall, the rekeying process, especially on the wire, is more efficient. But this is the particular case for an individual node to rekey, for instance, for the sake of wraparound. Okay, feedback on the implementation side. We are continuing on that. There's a RISE implementation covering the previous version of the draft. So essentially the basic functionalities of this profile. And we have work in progress on aligning the implementation of this latest version, plus admitting more than one transport profile. So we start with the DTLS profile. We're aligning that also to work when the OSCORE profile is used between the joining node and the group manager. There are also other ongoing planned implementations from Peter and Jim, yet we had already some early tests at the hackathon with join request and response exchanges between a joining node and the group manager of OSCORE. So as a summary, of course, as predictable, most of the updates were related to keeping this aligned to key group com, defining some more details typical to this application profile. We have a number of open points. Some need more thought, some are pretty clear. Among next steps, we'll do our best to simplify and shorten the document a bit to avoid repetition from key group com. We'll have to process the latest review from Ludwig step by step. More reviews are welcome, otherwise we'll continue implementing and hopefully go for a full interop in Singapore.
any comment from the room?
Okay, this document is instead a new one, proposing a new transport profile of ACE used for group communication. So to secure communication between a client and a resource server, both members of a group. Why did we start this? Well, you have an application using group communication, and you want to use group OSCORE to protect the message exchange in the group. As I quickly mentioned before, once everyone is in the group, what do you do about access control to access resources at the group members? Well, some use cases are very simple. They don't really need anything particularly difficult. The moment you had been authorized to become a member of the security group and you got the key material, in those use cases, you can just assume that any member can perform any operation at any other group member at any of its resource. And that can be fine. That can be not fine in some more complicated use cases, where essentially you want to differentiate different types of clients that are allowed to do different things of different resource servers in the group. You may think of creating additional security groups as you need. This risks to scale very poorly. You need to create many groups, perhaps, essentially one for each subset of clients, depending on the access rights you want to grant to them. So instead, it would make sense to think of using ACE to enforce fine-grained access control through access tokens. And then, if you consider using ACE, you have a problem. If you think of the currently available transport profiles of ACE, it's not possible to secure group communication, in particular using group OSCORE. And every currently available profile of ACE considers a single security protocol. Even if you think of the closest possible profile we can think about, the OSCORE profile, client and resource server are supposed to use OSCORE, and group OSCORE is just not admitted. So bottom line, you cannot have at the same time the usage of group OSCORE and an access control of resources at group members based on ACE. And the reason we started this document is exactly to fill this gap. So it's a new transport profile of ACE, a group OSCORE profile that strongly builds on the OSCORE profile by using a lot of its constructions. And it essentially admits two security protocols, both OSCORE and group OSCORE among group members. And as a starting point, it assumes that the client and resource server using this profile are already both member of an OSCORE group that they have joined in advance. You run this profile, and as a final result, you get a pairwise OSCORE security context between client and resource server, just like the OSCORE profile. But in addition, here you have the access token bound not only to the pairwise context, but also to the group OSCORE security context. In addition, the two different contexts are also bound to each other. And that's because we are deriving the pairwise context using also parameters from the group context. Properties are the one typical of the expectations from profiles of ACE. Plus here we also have proof of group membership for that exact client posting the token, thanks to the bound between the token and the group context. To give an overview in a feasible way as deltas from the OSCORE profile, first step, the client contacts the authorization server asking for an access token as usual. It specifies two additional pieces of information: the sender ID it has in the OSCORE group and the group ID of that group as values of two new parameters we are defining for the access token request. It is validated by the authorization server that releases the token. In the response to the client and then reflected in the access token, those values recur again, mostly for confirmation to the client and for information to the resource server through the access. What happened? Then the client continues posting the access token at the resource server, and there is an exchange of nonces just like it happens with the OSCORE profile. If the token is valid, the resource server stores the access token together with those two new additional parameters that the client has specified and that were included in the access token. And here is when things get interesting. For someone interested in the extreme details, this is aligned to the second from last version of the OSCORE profile. But I can skip that. Now, client and resource server have to derive the pairwise OSCORE security context as follows. Essentially, they need to prepare three parameters: context ID, master salt, and master secret, to derive the context. About the context ID, they concatenate the two nonces plus one more piece of information, the group ID of the OSCORE group, that, by the way, the server was able to retrieve also from the access token. For the master salt, they concatenate two pieces. The first one is the sender ID of the client in the OSCORE group that was also included in the access token for the resource server. And if any, because it can be empty, the master salt used in the OSCORE group context. The master secret concatenates two pieces. The first one is the OSCORE master secret indicated in the access token and provided also to the client as MS parameter. The second piece of information is the master secret of the OSCORE group. And well, both client and resource server know that because they are both members of that group. Here's an example. First, Peter.
Peter van der Stok, just one back.
Yes.
If the group it also takes in changes every time you make a new group, is that correct? Is that what I see there?
Yes, and this is really thinking.
And that is a bit annoying maybe, because possibly you want to specify the subset and you remain that even though the group may change and the group member change. So if you could just make the first part of the group it there instead of the whole group it, I think that would be more stable if when groups change. Correct?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. As a quick example, first a pairing between the client and the first resource server. So ask for the token first, specifying the sender ID in the group of that client and the ID of the group. Retrieve the token, post it to the resource server one. They derive the pairwise OSCORE context. Well, the client repeats exactly the same to get an access token to post at the resource server 2. They derive their own pairwise security context. Third step, there can be, for instance, a first unicast request with OSCORE from client to resource server, and you can see here the context ID is consistently extended. And then you have a multicast request protected with group OSCORE from C to the group, and both resource server 1 and 2 reply to the client. Now, for version 0, we have already an open point out of a very good discussion we had with Jim during the hackathon. Thank you very much. In the current design, there is a possible risk for impersonation from one group member to hurt another one. Essentially, you may have a node N1 in a group that asks for an access token, but declaring the sender ID of N2, N1 would get an access token for itself if it's authorized to. It can post it to the resource server, but then if it uses only unicast OSCORE, since no strict identity and no confirmation of the sender ID of N2 is involved, the consequences of that action performed legitimately by N1 can be kind of shifted to N2. So the way out for this is involving in the process exactly the public key that N1 uses in the group. This can be provided to the AS upon requesting the access token, and when doing that, performing proof of possession. Then the authorization server can include that public key also in the access token. It will be posted on the resource server that can then store the access token paired also together with that public key. And that would essentially fix that problem. So we plan for sure this update in the next version of the document. So as a final summary, this is a new transport profile of ACE to admit the usage of OSCORE and group OSCORE in a group communication scenario where you need some fine-grained access control on the group members' resources through ACE. Both unicast, pairwise, and group context are bound with each other, and the access token is bound to both contexts as well. And we are relying as much as possible to OSCORE and its constructions, just to not have an insane delta introduced here. Of course, comments, reviews are welcome.
Put it back in the... Jim Schott from the floor. Do we actually have a real-world use case for this yet, or is this speculation?
We can come up with a toy example.
Yeah, that's speculation.
That's speculation then. I'm not backed up by any real-world example of use case right now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
You're
we do.
fine.
Fine. So for those who were not following the side discussion on Jabber, I think there are a number of ACE documents and one or two core documents dealing with group communication security now. And it might be quite helpful for someone coming to one of these groups as a new participant to have, for example, a wiki page or an informational RFC that explains how these group communication documents interlink. So if someone wants to volunteer to write that up, there is a example that Francesca has in one of the drafts, but I think having it in one of the drafts is not that helpful.
Francesca, I volunteer as to review.
Thank you very much.
So I'm back. Today is security for group communication in ACE. Okay, so this draft is about co-op PubSub security using ACE. We're at version 5. So I already presented this slide. By now, I hope that I made a case. Yeah, we can discuss more on this, but hopefully we can keep with the current structure and improve the text so that it's not as confusing. So quick recap on this document. This document defines how to use ACE to authorize nodes and provision keys for co-op PubSub. The goal is to protect co-op PubSub communication using the keys provided. This draft was first submitted at IETF 98. It got several reviews and positive feedback, and it was then updated following the ACE GroupCom updates after the split with that document. There is related work that is going on. There is the core co-op PubSub that is close to being done in core, and then there is the MQTT PubSub profile of ACE that has been adopted in this working group. Last meeting, I believe. And then a picture to show the members or participants in this profile. So we have the publisher, subscriber, and the broker, and this profile aims at setting a security association between the publisher and the broker, and one between the publisher and the subscriber, optionally also one between the broker and the subscriber. And it uses two different authorization servers. There is also what we call the KDC, the Key Distribution Center, in the general document that is in the same node as the authorization server number 2. So we got a review very recently. So we're planning an update, which we would like the feedback from the working group about. So this comes from a review, but yeah. So the first request was to generalize the exchange and split the authorization and key distribution requests, which are now merged into one. So to make it more similar to ACE key group OSCORE, with the full first the ACE exchange and then the key distribution request and response. Because these two requests were merged, this was shorter and simpler, but we were asked to actually split this out and possibly mention this merge as an example or an optimization. Any comments about that? Question is, more general with an optimization example, or optimized but less general? I don't know.
Jim Schott.
I don't agree with optimized.
More general, no example. If you have the example, you have to document how to do the example.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't think it's worth it.
Well, the example would be what is now in the document, with the two merged and with one node that is both AES2 and KDC.
But that also means that you have to do all the registration and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I don't, since it is the text that is already in the document, I don't think that would be very complicated to have. But yeah, I can try, and then we can get reviews and see.
Can we understand the document without the examples?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the example would be the example of a more specific case where you merge the KDC and the AES. There's still examples about the general. Okay, so next point. Reuse the OSCORE mechanisms to do key derivation, nonce derivation, replay protection. So right now, the part about actually securing the pub sub, it's only using COSI and with keys in place and just protecting the content, the publication content. So now we can make this better by using, for example, replay protection mechanisms, sequence numbers, and using the nonce derivation that is in OSCORE. Any comments about that? Hannes? You don't need OSCORE to implement this.
I understand. I was just wondering, like, who provided the feedback to make those changes?
So this latest review was from Jim, but we got more reviews also for previous version.
So you mean multiple people suggesting these changes, or
sorry, I can't
multiple people suggesting these changes that you have up there?
No, this one are only from the last review. But
from Jim. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they all come from this last review, but previous reviews were done as well. Another point is about defining the additional processing steps, such as encrypt, decrypt, and verify with the material that would be defined above. And then finally, to do the updates to comply with the updates to ACE Group.com that I just mentioned in the previous presentation. So the biggest change would be the first point, and possibly the second. But no, the content is not, yes, it wouldn't change too much. So the next steps would be to update first, then we think, or I think, that this document is ready for adoption, and I would like to get it adopted as soon as possible so that it can be moved forward with the MQTT pub sub. In the MQTT pub sub authors were interested in this because they were interested in the part about protection of the publication content. So maybe we can reuse that and synchronize with them about that part.
How many people have read the draft?
Yeah.
Any?
I know that there are more because there are some people there that have provided reviews that are not in the room.
Well, I think we will take that to the list, but we need definitely more reviews than the hand we've seen in this room. Maybe that would be good. The MQTT people review the draft as well, especially if they have to see. They have, so that they.
Okay. Any other business? I have one item. We had a choral side meeting this week, and one of the things that was discussed in that was we need to probably define a choral vocabulary that can be published as part of a choral document so that people can locate things like authentication servers, key servers, and whatnot. So we need to find some people to do that. And it potentially, there was a document which was presented in core this morning. That was a long time ago. That defines some link format attributes that do much the same thing. And at that point in time, I suggested that potentially that document should be migrated into this working group rather than stay in Coral, since it seems to be mostly focused on advertising ACE features. So I expect both of those things to come to the list over the next month or so. Anyone else have anything else they want to say? Ben, do you want to say that you're reviewing documents? I thought you were an area director.
I do believe I'm an area director.
That means you can tell a lie.
Yes. So I had a very busy 2 or 3 months, just outside of work, personal sort of stuff. So basically, all I was doing for the IETF ISG was to review documents for the telechats, and so that means I was not reviewing documents for my working groups, and things kind of piled up. But things in my own life have quieted down in the past couple of weeks or so, and I'm clearing the backlog. And mostly I'm doing it in first in, first out. But if there's a reason to prioritize something, I'm happy to move things around. Right now, I am in the middle of the CWT POP, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 more ACE documents after that before something else was next in the list. But we should be seeing some progress on the ACE documents in the next couple of weeks.
So we can hope to have reviews from you on everything before the end of August?
Yes.
Does anybody else want to stand up and make any statements to the ACE working group? Okay. We will see you in Singapore.
Blue sheet. Has everyone signed the blue sheet?